Hey, what are the odds that Las Vegas set on a wrestling match between God and Jacob?
I mean, it'd be foolish if they didn't go. What would be perfect odds, right? Is there a sure thing? One to a, how do you describe odds? 100 to 1, 200 to 1 that God would lose.
What, that God would
I
lose?
mean, sorry, that God would, yeah, because of course
Y-
a long shot has the bigger number,
y-
right? I've always wondered about this. How this thing figured?
Well, you need to get up on your gambling vocabulary, I guess. What does Kevin from The Office say? If anybody ever gives you 10,000 to 1 odds on anything, you take it. I mean, it's hard to calculate it, but I wonder if Polymarket, which is from what I understand a website that you can gamble just about anything with, including political elections. I wonder what they would set the odds at, because it's kind of incalculable because God is infinite.
Well, so I mean, the odds are figured in the market strategy fashion in that way. So, if anybody bets towards Jacob, then that influences the determination of the odds, right? So somebody would bet for Jacob. Somebody would. Kevin. Kevin from The Office would, right? Say, this is a long shot. I put a bucket down, and if Jacob wins, I'm a billionaire.
That's right. Now, I guess the question is it a push, as in did they tie, or are you going to take this line? It says that God tells him that he prevailed against him. So does Jacob win?
Yeah. I mean, I think that what's the way to describe it? Okay, so if you don't you have little girls, so they don't want to wrestle in the same way that boys do, probably. Maybe they do. I don't know. I guess Renata likes to roughhouse, but it's different. It's a different game with Renata than it is with the boys. And when I let them win at something, they are sure that they won, right? They're convinced that they won, but they didn't actually win. So
That's the best metaphor for it. Wrestling with your little kids. Now, if we're gonna put this story on today's terms, God threw the match because one of his buddies had big money on the line, and the question is, who is he trying to pay off? That's the real question. Was the Italian mob a thing at this point?
I'm trying to think of the joke that's there, but I got nothing. But it is he's settling the debt for himself, right? He's settling his own account. But he's got the book. The books have to line up. Right? The numbers have to tally at the bottom of the ledger. Uh, yeah. So in order to make it all balance out in the end, he throws in the match.
Well, let's talk about sports gambling for a little bit, because it's really the bane of our existence. It's ruined everything. So last week, head coach of the Trailblazers, Chauncey Billups, and Terry Rozier, a player in the NBA and another former player, were arrested for a couple different things, either point shaving, or there was this poker game that the mob was orchestrating, and they would use these celebrity basketball players to attract high rollers in, and the card machine was rigged so that the house knew exactly who was going to win, and there was a signal coming from outside of the room to the big cheese. Maybe that's what they call him. The guy who's, he knows everything that's going on, who would send signals to everybody else, sending odds, who's most likely to win. And that's what Chauncey Billups is accused of. We're going to say allegedly. Now, I'd be tickled if we were actually brought up on a lawsuit on this podcast because we defame somebody.
Defamation suit. Yeah.
How awesome would that be? I grew up rooting for Chauncey Billups. Those '04 Pistons were awesome, but Chauncey Billups versus David Buchs in the I don't even know what state it would be in. Maybe Oregon. That would be one heck of a court case.
Let me just say, all publicity is good publicity. And when we're trying to put the CloudCast on the map, a good lawsuit, a good defamation suit, that'll get things rolling, right?
That's true. Now I've been trying to connect the dots. So yesterday, and you don't do sports really. I mean, other than yourself. So did you see that Louisiana State fired their football coach?
Nope, did not see that.
So they fired Brian Kelly after 3.5 years, and they owe him $52 million, which shockingly is not the largest buyout of a head football coach in college football. That distinction belongs to Jimbo Fisher, who was fired by Texas A&M a few years ago. His buyout was $77 million. Now get this. You can't make this up. Two different schools, Texas A&M and LSU, but it was the same athletic director who hired both of them at the different schools.
What's the buyout for the athletic director? That's the next question.
That's good. I looked up his salary. I think it's just shy of like 2 million. It's like 1.8 million.
So it's far more lucrative to be an unsuccessful coach than to be an athletic director.
Correct. Yep. But that's the problem is like all these comments are, well, he's got 52 million reasons to be happy. And I understand that, but at some point it's just a game. Right? Because if you get $50 million, I know your personality. You're not going to be happy just sitting at home, going to the beach every day. I like to think that gets boring after a while.
Yeah, I'm going to try to win something. If I got $52 million for being unsuccessful at football, I'm going to take that 52 and I'm going to try to win something.
Now the crazy thing is also with this is if he gets hired by another school, then LSU owes him less money.
That's interesting. A non-compete clause, huh? I
Well,
wonder what.
it's not a non-compete clause. It's just if they don't have to pay him what he's already making at the other school.
I see.
So so what I for the record, like I think Brian Kelly's kind of I don't think he's a great human being. He used to be the head coach at Notre Dame, which is a Catholic university, and notorious for his potty mouth. And so he's working at this Catholic university, dropping all sorts of F-bombs on the sideline. And I never understand why the cameras tilt to these guys after a bad play. Like what do you think he's gonna say? He's like, oh man, oh fiddlesticks.
Yeah. Well, isn't that how they? I mean, isn't that the talent of a cameraman? Would be to get you as close to FCC violations as you can without actually like without actually breaking the rules.
That's true. But what I'm saying is, if I'm Brian Kelly, I'm gonna go work for a school for like $10 a year
Mhm.
because he's not gonna make any more money. The amount is already set. It's just how much Louisiana is going to owe him. Now the crazy thing is these are two state universities, and this one athletic director has cost the states of Texas and Louisiana, and I'm sure there's boosters and all that kind of stuff, but $120 million in fired football coaches.
So now that's interesting because going and working for $10 uh, sounds great because for one thing, his livelihood does not depend on his success or failure, and seeing as he is would be being charitable, like he's just donating his time and his efforts, he could do whatever he wants, right? What are they gonna do? You know, they gonna they gonna fire him?
That's true, especially if it's a smaller school who you get a profile like a guy like that. There's no pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
So the reason I bring that up is there's a strong connection between sports gambling and then these ridiculous payouts because sports gambling gets legalized nationally in the United States in 2018. So that's 7 years ago. Used to be, you had to go to Vegas or bet illegally, which happened quite a bit. And I was trying to do some research on this. So Americans gambled $150 billion last year, which is staggering.
Mhm.
um, but what it actually seems like is that amount really hasn't increased all that much. It's just shifted from an illegal pool to the legal designation. So I think this is really fascinating. What's the difference then? And I think it makes all the difference in the world because Christians will say this: you can't legislate morality. And Doug Wilson's got a great line to that. He's like, okay, can you legislate immorality?
So hang on one second. I'm just thinking about scale here. If the $150 billion amount hasn't really changed, I mean, I imagine there must be some sort of an uptick, but I imagine like, if there was, let's say it was a nominal uptick, which would be um, like guys like you and me. if we were involved in sports betting, we're not moving the needle on the balance of the dollars that are being wagered. But so what that indicates is that like the bulk of it is from high rollers, big balance guys who were doing it illegally before and now are doing it legally, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's the same argument for marijuana, right? People are gonna smoke it, ingest it, whatever. The government might as well get some tax revenue from it. Which, can you see my dolls? They're blurred behind me, but those are Jesse Ventura dolls. Now I was too young to even remember his governorship, and I didn't live in Minnesota at the time. But from what I understand, that was his argument, and that's the more and more I grew up, maybe I'm just becoming more and more of a grumpy conservative. But like, stay off the weed. Stop gambling. It's not, do we really want a society of people who are high all the time, who are just constant wrecks because they're watching Monday Night Football and the game has no bearing whatsoever on the season, but people have got millions of dollars on the line? Is that the kind of country we want?
Yeah, well, I mean that's right. It's a perfect combination of misaligned incentives. So you got on the one something that costs fewer entertainment. So the reason why I never know names, I rarely know names and current information about sports is because the only interest that I have in sports is like great feats of athleticism. So when Shohei Ohtani hits 3 home runs and pitches, six innings with whatever 12 strikeouts, that's pretty cool. Or when Yamamoto pitches a complete game, that's pretty fun. I have to work to remember which team he plays for. Then plays for the Dodgers or the Blue Jays. But that's pretty cool. That's pretty amazing. But uh, otherwise, sports have really taken on this like purely entertainment value thing. With the NFL, the changes in the NFL over the years have demonstrated that. So you combine, on the one hand, pure consumptive entertainment to a large degree with this ultimately base desire to get something for nothing, right? To not have to labor for your wages. And it's great. You can get entertained while you're scratching that, chasing that fantasy that somehow you're going to become a millionaire without. I mean, it's a slash, right? That's what it is, essentially.
So I hear a little bit of the language of usury in your vocabulary, trying to get something from nothing, which is why the medieval dogmaticians opposed interest rates.
So now, your comment about legalizing these things is I think is valuable. I'm reading a book about Anthony Comstock, who is notable most for the laws that were passed in the late 1800s or mid to late 1800s that regulated vice. And so he was this enforcer, this postmaster, I think is what his official designation was, postmaster. And I have to get more of the details about his career, but in any case, his argument for like pursuing vice, like prosecuting vice earnestly, is that its influence is perniciously corruptive. Okay, so when you can start distributing through the postal service obscene images, he's making this argument already in the mid 1800s that young people see these images and they are ruined because they've seen them once. I mean, just like if only he knew, right? But when you legalize things, when you make them much more open and when you permit them and attach no shame to them, their corruptive influence grows, right? That would be one argument against it, against legalizing it. Even if people are going to do it anyways, at least you are regulating it by um, adding some element of shame to the vice, right?
Yeah, because if it's legalized, then it's state supported.
Right.
Because at this point, all of our politicians have a vested interest in supporting gambling because they're getting dollars from them for their campaign funds, allegedly. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I'm just connecting the dots here. Just same thing with these universities, state universities, huge uptick in revenue, and it's all coming from gambling. It's really sick. There was a New Yorker article a few years ago about these gambling companies that have partnerships with universities like Michigan State, I remember. And so like in the football stadium, they've got these special offers for these students, and you know all about 20-year-old men, you know, we're great, lots of energy, but your brain's not fully developed yet, and you're like, hey, you place $5 on this wager, we're going to give you $1,000 in free wagers. And this
Mm.
was happening in state schools. From these, and they're getting these kids hooked on gambling. It's kind of like, now this would be way cooler, but it's kind of like Joe Camel running ads for cigarettes on little TV, on little kids TV shows. I'd be more in favor of that, I think, than than having these gambling setups, and which it's just state sponsored. Let's get you addicted to everything.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So now help me think this through because I had a counterpoint occur to me recently, not in terms of like your argument about state sponsorship, but about general moral decline in our world. So, it's a CIA original headquarters building. There's a quotation from John chapter 8 engraved in the wall, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, which I've used before for Reformation sermon. I used it yesterday because it's hilarious in all kinds of ways. Um, Especially because they leave off what comes before the and. And they didn't have the good sense to get rid of the and, which is kind of like connected to if you abide in my word, you will certainly be my disciples, right? But get this, the guy who insisted on having that engraved in the wall of the headquarters building was Alan Dulles. I mistakenly said Avery Dulles yesterday, which is a whole different thing. But Alan Dulles, CIA director from the 1950s, and I forget his dates, 50s and 60s. He insisted on having that there. His father was a Presbyterian minister, described by Wikipedia as theologically liberal, but socially very conservative, um, which is great. Okay, so he grew up in this staunchly Presbyterian, rigorous house, and becomes director of the CIA, and insists on having this um, engraved on the wall. Um, Now, Alan Dulles was a notorious philanderer, and um, uh, his sister commented after he died that he had more than 100 affairs over the course of his life, and his biographers have discovered, all kinds of correspondence, even with his wife, about the affairs that he was having while he was overseas doing various kinds of things. So this is interesting because the article that I read this in was from the New York Times in 2014, and it said that um, newsmen did not consider those kinds of indiscretions newsworthy at the time. It was an open secret that he was a philanderer. I mean, this is true. We know this about high-profile political figures and movie stars and all of that. That basically adulterous corruption was rampant, has been for a long time. But it was an open secret and wasn't really an issue. The article was pointing out that it is now in a way that it wasn't then. So when somebody is outed for having an affair, even a single affair, it's now something that disqualifies them, or at least it makes it really difficult for them to continue to pursue public office. And that's really interesting. So on the one hand, our scruples about sexual indiscretions have not changed whatsoever. Seem to have grown worse. On the other hand, the public regard for, like what makes for a man of high character has changed. I can't quite wrap my head around it, right? So here's my supposition. You're describing this kind of decline with state-sponsored gambling, sports betting. I wonder if these things just sort of ebb and flow, So like um, it's a moving target, like which vice is going to be promoted, which vice is going to be tolerated, which vice is going to be, are we going to become moralizing about, right? And we just cycle through them as history progresses.
That's really intriguing because we're very highly selective about which sins and which people. So I agree with what you just said, but consider our current president of the United
Right.
States. And then consider his, what is it, the Secretary of, is it Agriculture or FDA, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
notorious adulterer as well. That's really intriguing. Yeah, which people are we going to hold to account for certain sins? I was in high school when I first started reading the Wall Street Journal, and this is when the Anthony Weiner debacle in New York was happening. You remember that?
Hmm.
And you couldn't make it up. Like, it was just it was perfect on so many levels.
It's one of those things that makes you think that they're really just playing with us, right?
That's right. But then that was a huge scandal, and I don't. I mean, I think he had to resign from office. I think I don't know. Um, because have you been keeping track of the George Santos storyline? That's his name, right? The representative
Yeah,
from New York.
who was
And
had to
and his
resign in ignominy, right? Didn't he?
yeah, because he's just a serial liar, just about like absolutely everything. And then his justification on it, you should go listen to the Tucker Carlson show, was essentially like, well, I'm not as bad as everybody else, which is which is probably true, but it's also a really lame defense.
Yeah, this is really interesting because, of course, it puts into perspective our moralizing tendency, even about the scriptures. Like these questions that I can't help but bring up, like from time to time, like did Jacob do the right thing? It's like, well, sometimes that's not the question, right? Okay, so take for instance, like why is there more tolerance, especially on the right, interestingly, for Trump and for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose indiscretions are public and known. And there's an element of like, well, they're married and they have public, kind of like like when you want to defame somebody, or when you want to bring somebody's reputation down, you talk about how their marriage is kind of on the rocks, right? You like she hasn't been seen in public with him for some time, so her approval of him has whatever declined, and that's evidence of the fact that he's not stable or whatever it might be. So it's interesting because at the same time that like marriage is super devalued, there's something about like the stability of a marriage that makes you think that everything's okay. Seemingly, everything connects back to divorce, irrespective of how many times the marriage has been blown up before and the promises of marriage have been broken before. It's like, well, it's okay if he's married now, and that's what makes it all okay, right? That's interesting.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if the right really justifies it that way. I think it's more of it's the politically savvy move to do, which
Fair
I'm
enough.
I'm not here to I'm not here to tell you that's right or that's wrong. I mean, I voted for the guy, and I'll say that. It's like just in a am I happy with his morality? No. I mean politics. If we want to keep our hands clean, we are in the wrong business of life.
Yeah. So we should definitely react against state sponsorship of vice, but we should also be realistic about the existence of vice and its effects on people, even if it's not state sponsored, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, you're never going to get the ideal, and you talked quite a bit about this, the ideal man. If I was picking the ideal man for my podcast, I don't know if I'd pick you. Like if I'm designing him, from the top down. But I realized really
Better
early
top
on,
down. Thanks a
you're
lot.
the best I got,
I
and
was thinking
I
about
mean that.
that. I mean, that is the political thing to say, right? And uh, you do get yourself into all kinds of trouble if you are idealistic, right? What's the proper balance between, on the one hand, not losing sight, not being obscure about the ideal, but also being realistic about, and I even hate using that word realistic. So I was thinking about this in terms of consensus. If you have an organization, if you're running an organization, like say a church, for instance, or a family, right? The ideal is consensus. You want everybody on the same page. You want everybody pulling in the same direction. The likelihood that that happens is pretty low. So, because of that, you're tempted in several directions. On the one hand, you're tempted to never be satisfied because you never reach consensus. The other temptation is to never attempt consensus because you know that you can't attain it, and so are you make tactical errors because you don't build the consensus that you can, right? Um, and somewhere in between is this element of wisdom, which feels like selling out, right? To somebody who like has an ideal in mind, it feels like selling out to settle for something less than complete consensus. And yet That's that's what you. I mean, is it simple enough to say like that's what you have to do in this life? You have to settle,
a, a little bit. What you just described, of course, is the process of calling a pastor.
right?
So if you guys don't know, congregations call a guy, and they're voting typically on two or three different candidates, and then they got to get a majority, and then what happens after they have a majority is they take another vote to affirm what they just voted for, so they can tell the guy that they unanimously called him.
Does feel
So
better when you got a unanimous vote.
have you ever been called and said, Pastor Buchs, congratulations, we ununanimously what's the that's a mouthful. We did not unanimously vote to call you, but we have called you.
Well, I mean that does happen in any case where like say you were on the list and they called somebody else first, right? It's like, well, it is what it is, you know?
I yeah, I that's fine. Like I don't get hurt about. I don't really care. But that's just how people are. We're really bad. I'm including myself in this. Really bad judges of who we think will fit in certain spots. Within a certain parameter, of course. It's like look at all these athletic directors hiring these head football coaches.
Interesting.
All right.
By
Well,
the
should we read our advertisement from FanDuel now?
way. What's the market on sports references that Josh brings up that I have no idea? Names that he drops that I do not recognize. Those are pretty good
You don't
odds.
you don't recognize that name? I think that's the largest sports betting company in the country now.
FanDuel, yeah, but all those names that you said earlier, I didn't recognize a single one of them.
Well, all this means is we're gonna have to start a second podcast where I educate you on. We're gonna call it a brief history of sports in America.
That'll get us in trouble with trademarks. That'll be a problem.
I look forward to it. I'll see you in court. Okay, cool. Well, let's get to this wrestling match. You have any introductory thoughts on
Well,
Genesis 32?
okay,
I
so just
I love this. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious what your take is on this opening move here. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him, and then it's just kind of like, oh, this is God's camp, and then he moves on. But there's this ambiguity. Seems to me, I didn't look at it closely. I'm looking right now because, of course, the word for angels is the same as the word for messenger used in verse 3, right? Malakim and the Malate Elohim in verse 1. So what's the deal? If when people do you ever occasion to talk about like what well you did Saint Michael and all angels, right? What are the angels for? What are they doing here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm wanting to make a connection with Jacob's ladder, which seems like it would have been the last time that he saw the angels, right? Ascending and descending on that stairway to heaven. Um, it seems to me to be an encouragement, the biggest thing. Like God's angels are with me here. I'm about to go meet my brother who wants to kill me, and yet God's providing his angels to protect me.
Do you think this is fair? This is what I usually end up saying about that question. I think it fits with what you just described. So how do the angels protect him? I mean, I suppose at times there's physical protection. It's like when the Assyrian army, when they wake up the next morning, there's 185,000 dead bodies. The angels slew all of those soldiers. But the kind of protection that angels usually provide is not physical protection. It is a reminder. It's bearing a message, right? It's a reminder of God's promises. This, I think, is, I think you can see this across the board. Like even the angels coming to Jesus, ministering to him in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? As he's praying, what are they doing? Well, I mean, what he needs in that moment is to remember that he is God's son, right? And that God has made promises to him.
Yeah, because the word is they ministered to him.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a parallel here. I just teaching yesterday about God's identification of Israel as his son coming out of Egypt. And I hadn't noticed this before, but already in Exodus 4, before Moses goes to Pharaoh, God says to Moses, you're going to go and tell Pharaoh, let my son go, or else I'll kill your firstborn son. And that, Israel is Jacob, right? So here God is with his son doing the same thing that he does for Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, right?
Hmm. Telling him the right word at the proper time.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
What would you call that? Would you call that a word fitly spoken,
You
David
could.
Buchs?
There's like apples of gold in a setting of silver. Nice to
That's
have a podcast in which we can talk about lots of, issues, etc.
all right. That's it. I'm quitting. That was very very good of you. I mean, we could just put it all on the line right now, buddy.
Yeah. Um, we can keep
For
going.
for for
Let's forget about it. Okay, keep going.
No,
Let's
that was
see.
fun. For anybody who doesn't know, we just referenced a bunch of Lutheran podcasts, and it's up to you to figure out what the names of them were.
I'm just afraid that we're only identifying how utterly lame we are, or I am, I guess. These are kind of the jokes
Well,
I make.
it's really bad because I just preached yesterday that we need to stop being so self-referential. And here I am. All I can do is quote other Lutheran podcasts.
Yeah. If only, yeah, the problem is Pints with Aquinas would not have been very subtle. That one's a little bit too in your face.
That's right. But Pints with Bruce Tim, that's a podcast idea that has got legs.
You got it. I would tune in.
Okay, good. I want to talk about the structure of this, and we can get back to what's, because he's not going to actually meet Jacob yet. That comes after, but that's really startling that the wrestling match happens in between the struggle with Esau. So here's my question: is Esau, when he comes with the 400 men, is that a declaration of war?
Yeah, I was comparing that with what Jacob does, where he sends messengers ahead, basically saying, "I've got all of this stuff, right? Um, I have sojourned, and I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, and female servants." There's an element of saying to Esau, "Look, I'm not a threat to you because I have all of these things." And I could imagine Esau having the same mind about him, right? Look, I'm not a threat to you because what do I care about you at this point? I have 400 men, right? I don't whatever you have um done to disenfranchise me, it's had no effect. Look at me.
Um, well, so that could be a good way of reading it. I kind of want to read it that it actually is an appeasement. So if Esau is the representative of the pagan nations, it would make sense then that he thinks that he's God. And so Jacob, this is a weird way, but he says this, I'm going to appease my brother. So it's almost like he's trying to make atonement for what he had done
Hmm.
to his older brother. But it's also another way of looking at it is that he is sharing the birthright and the blessing with his brother. So that which he had stolen from Esau, he's kind of returning in that sense.
Yeah.
So it's 550 animals, and it could be more because we're just told with the 30 milk camels that they're colts. So I don't know how many colts 30 milk camels would have, but it's
Probably
over
just one each.
550. Okay, so let's put it at 580 animals probably ish. That's a lot of livestock. How many head do you have right now?
Zero. Yeah, that's a lot. What I would give for 30 milking camels and their calves, man. That'd be great.
What would you give?
A big hug to whoever would give them to me. I got nothing. Um,
I am not selling you my milk camels anytime soon, sir.
let's see here. Now, Jacob comments about the scale of things as well, right? He says, "See, oh God of my father Abraham, you told me to return. I'm not worthy. For look now, I'm left with nothing, and now I have become two camps." There's almost this element of like realization here, right? He's just like he's taking stock. He's taking stock of how much he has. Right? It's kind of like this is the least I could do.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what to make of the two camps because the number two keeps getting repeated. So you got two camps, and you could take that in a couple different ways. First of all, it's Jacob's camp and then God's camp with the angels there. But then it's Jacob's camp and Esau's camp. And then in verse 22, that's great because it's 2-2. He arose that night, took his two wives, two female servants. So it's a very binary thing that's happening. got
Hmm.
tutus all over the place.
Yep.
But the key is how to reconcile the two camps together, right? So to make the two into one flesh, almost you could say.
So the attempt to appease, I mean, it really does kind of fall on its face, right? Because in the next chapter, not to get ahead of ourselves here, they kind of have this like this disagreement about who's, do I need your things? No, I don't need your things. Let's go ahead. We're going to stay ahead of you, Jacob and Esau, right? They're not merging their two camps. The effort at appeasement um, doesn't work for producing unity. But the thing that between God's camp and Jacob's camp is this clinging to the promise, right? Insisting on a blessing from God and holding on to the promise, right? That is the marital. That's the marital relationship, right? It's not one of appeasement. It's not one of taking my due or um, keeping a ledger, but it is making promises and receiving blessings.
And that's the problem with Esau. You have an earthly peace with Jacob, but if you're not gonna be like Ruth and say to Naomi, "Where you go, I will go, and your God shall be my God," then eternally it doesn't do anything good for you.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm just thinking back to the previous chapter when um, you have this division between Laban and Jacob. Similarly, they put up this memorial stone, basically to memorialize the fact that they have earthly peace. But like the tenor of that chapter is like this peace is so fragile. Really doesn't amount to anything. It's just waiting for some fracture.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention this. So 31 verse 53, the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor.
Hmm.
That is syncretism 101.
Yeah, interesting. That's fascinating. Yeah, yeah.
And
And
it's
that's
so that's going to be the same thing with Esau. Yeah.
striking that you get this unusual description in the very next sentence, right? So then Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, almost as if it's like he's making the distinction, not Nahor's God, right?
That's that's right. So this is where if you're asked to pray in public, like I am at the cemeteries here in Clear Lake every year for our Memorial Day service. Happy to do it, glad to do it. But I'm going to make that prayer as evangelical and Christian as possible.
Yeah. So um, you have to make it so that you make uncomfortable the Jews and the Muslims who might be joining along, right? If they're not uncomfortable, you haven't done it right.
Yeah, I'm gonna pray in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and in the name of Jesus. Make reference to the crucifixion, those kind of things, and because we're not praying to the God of Nahor.
Right. Yeah, well, that gets back to your question about kind of creeping universalism, right? You can forge a really cozy temporal peace by saying we're all just worshiping the same God, right? We're all in this together. We're all pursuing the same truth. That wisdom and goodwill require you to never make any distinctions between yourself and anyone else. That's the kind of peace that you can obtain. It's like this peace between Jacob and Esau, right? Or between Jacob and Laban. And what's interesting is that I mean this is great because Jacob can't change Laban's mind about it. He's not gonna be like convince Laban that somehow his God is different from the God that Laban's referring to. He's not making an apologetic argument. Like, no, wait a minute. He's just stating the facts, and then Laban goes his own way, right? It's just that's how it is.
Yeah, so this is where the wrestling with God really comes in. So there is no real peace without the Prince of Peace, and I mean Jesus Christ. So this is why the structure here is so beautiful. Who like the it seems like initially the problem is with does Jacob have peace with Esau, but the real problem is does Jacob have peace with God?
Yeah, that's really good. That's the theme of Genesis in a lot of ways, right? Is um, God has promised peace to His people, and are you gonna pursue peace? Are you gonna seek peace and pursue it, or are you gonna be duplicitous? That's Psalm 34, right? That you keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking lies, right? Speaking deceit.
Now, when we're told that a man in the middle of the night just starts coming and wrestling with Jacob, do you think Jacob initially thinks it's Esau?
He must have, right? I mean, that's the only that's the that's the only possibility. I think it's noteworthy that he doesn't say an angel came and wrestled with him, right? It's a man. Um, and who else? Who else could it be?
Are we told in, was it Hosea? I think it's Hosea 12. I think Hosea 12 does describe it actually as an angel. Yes, so Hosea 12:4 says, so verse 3 is, in the womb he took his brother by the heel, and in his manhood he strove with God. Verse 4, he strove with the angel and prevailed. So that's, obviously that's later in the prophets, but it is, you've pointed this out, the interchangeability of angel and man. Maybe we shouldn't draw as much of a distinction as we do, although we do have to make a distinction.
Yeah, yeah, interesting.
So at what point does Jacob realize this isn't Esau? Is it, so are both men shirtless? Because that's a giveaway. It's like if I'm wrestling with somebody and he's got a hairy back, I know I'm wrestling with David Buchs, or Esau. And then so when he feels the smooth back, is he like, oh man, this isn't my brother?
Yeah, how much how much internal dialogue is going on inside his head while he's also trying to trying to keep his life, right? I mean, this at the very least, when the fellow reaches out and touches his hip socket, and then his hip is put out of joint. Now it's undeniable. Not only that you're not wrestling with Esau, but that also you're not wrestling with flesh and blood, right?
Hmm. Yeah, so that wounded hip, this is our condition in this life. Like we are injured. We've got a thorn in the flesh, if you will, and it's actually better for Jacob. It's actually better for us that we would have that injury and realize it.
So what's the so help me understand this here, because on the one hand, I think the basic gist of it you could say is God grapples with Jacob because he wants Jacob in the end to um, he wants him to insist on the blessing. He wants him to hold on to nothing else other than the blessing from God. And we read this lesson. It's the Old Testament lesson that goes along with the Canaanite woman in the gospel, right? So she falls down before Jesus and clings to him in the way that Jacob is clinging to the man here. So this move though of touching Jacob's hip feels like the way that it's described like like a backup plan. When the man sees that he did not prevail against Jacob, then he went and touched his hip socket. So what's going on there? What was God's what did God want to happen? Did he want it to was this his original design was I'm going to wrestle with Jacob. He's going to hold on to me. I'm going to touch his hip, and then he'll recognize that he should be clinging to me for a blessing. Or is there something about the touching in the hip that's necessary from the outset? Because you're saying this is our condition, right? Like unless our hip socket's been touched by God, unless He's given us a limp, we will forget. We'll forget that we've had to wrestle with Him, and that prevailing over Him means clinging to His promises, right?
I think that's what it is. It's kind of like we obviously don't recognize the image of God in humanity anymore because it's been, distorted, and yet it's still there. So we need reminders that it's still there, whether it be some kind of physical limp. Because anytime you encounter with God, something about you is going to change. And usually it's going to be physical, right? Like Moses' face shines. But this was it's worth noting, this happened at night, and God needs to get away before the light shines. Because you can't look at God face to face if the light's shining. That's so God is gracious. I mean, all these things always happen at night, right? Abraham with the that vision, and then Nicodemus coming to Jesus at night. All this striving.
You don't get that same sense with the three visitors coming to Abraham at the Oaks of Mamre. They come in broad daylight, right? Something different going on there. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, it's because the angels they wore reflectors so they could help hide away some of God's glory.
There you go, man. Yeah, and well, and Jacob knows it, right? Verse 30, I've seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. So even in the cover of night, he knows that he was in great danger by grappling with God.
Right now, it's Deborah who brings us up again in her song at the end of the song. But your friends be like the sun as he rises in his might. Because in verse 31 it says, as he crossed the over Peniel, the sun rose on him, and he limps with his hip. I mean, you have to get echoes of Samson here because his name means sun, and then obviously he has a physical malady, and he uses that to overcome the world.
Yeah.
I'm also getting so this is a little bit different, but and I think we've mentioned it on the podcast. I'll talk about Lord of the Rings with whoever, so I can't remember. But it's kind of the same progression in the last book, Return of the King. They destroy the ring, and that's at the very beginning of the book, and then the rest of it is them going back to the Shire. So it's like once you've conquered the devil, then you can finally go home and conquer your own family, which is great. Here it's a little bit different because it's once you quote unquote conquer, strive with God, then you are finally ready to go make peace with the world.
First things first, right? You get that sorted out first, and then everything else will fall into place. Or maybe it's like you're ready to bring peace to the world, right? Because this is kind of like this is the descending of the 72, right? They come back and Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning, but rejoice not that the devils obey your authority, that your names are written in the book of life. Part of their task in going out, having had their names written in the book of life, part of the task in going out is bringing this crisis to people, right? Are you with me or are you against me? Right? Am I brushing off the dust from my feet, or or am I dwelling with you? Right? Am I residing with you? Right? And I mean that's what Jacob does, and this is what Jacob's people, are supposed to do, right? Having had peace made with God, there's supposed to be a light to the Gentiles, which the Gentiles can either reject or receive.
Hmm. But the light is there and it's undeniable.
Yes, exactly.
My other option for who does Jacob think this is that he's wrestling with is, and now you will wrestle my cousin Mose.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you want to comment on name changes? Is the best analogy for this when a woman changes her name to it reflects something drastic has changed in your life, so your name's got to change.
Yeah, well, I mean, and specifically belonging to a new family, coming under a new head, if you could put it that way. Um, what do we have? We have Abram and Sarai. We have Jacob to Israel. Do we have other Old Testament name changes? Trying to think. I was just thinking about Hosea, where he says to Israel, "You will no longer call me Baal, but you will call me my husband." Right? And these people are not my people, and no mercy, but people will no longer be known by those names. So there's an element of um, uh, the name indicates who you belong to. That's a big part of it. Who do you belong to?
That's good. Okay, so you mentioned that, and it makes me think like God's name doesn't change, but the name that God tells us to call him does change throughout time. So, initially we're not. This is always something that's miffed me because we're told all the way back, near the beginning of Genesis. Is it Genesis 4 or 5 that then that was when people started to call on the name of the Lord? But then the name, Yahweh doesn't get fully revealed until Moses in Exodus. And so I'm not exactly sure what to make of that, but it's clear that God's got different names. One of my college professors really hated the song El Shaddai. Is that Amy Grant? You know it, right? Can you sing it for us?
I mean, I won't.
Okay. Oh, okay. Good distinction. But God Almighty, Yahweh, Elohim, and then obviously the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But it's not till the New Testament, after Christ comes back from the dead, that we're given the name Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Just trying to think of what that means, and is there a parallel? Like, I mean, you do kind of, is it a matter of needing intimacy, for instance, right? So you might know somebody as Mr. or Mrs. So and so, but then if you become personally acquainted, right, you become familiar. Or this is true in some languages. German is a good example of this. There's the difference between formal and informal address, different pronouns for informal and formal address. And I remember this distinctly. There was a doctoral candidate at the seminary in Oberursel who was undergoing his examination. And I remember one of the things that they did as kind of a rite after he passed his doctoral examination was that the professors then said to him, right, you may now duzen me. You may use the pronoun du instead of sie because now he's on the same level as them, right? And that also means like on a first name basis, right? Do you have this struggle, seeing professors and not calling them Professor so and so or Doctor so and so, calling them by their first name?
It depends on how much respect I have for them.
Or how little respect you want to show for them. That's true sometimes for people do that occasionally, deliberately to their pastor. I've heard it. I've heard it in real time before. It's kind of shocking when somebody like calls their pastor by their first name in order to like kind of say you're not my pastor or whatever it might be.
Right. And I mean, this has happened across a lot of society where people don't go by their last names anymore. Like, it's it's Grandpa David
Right.
or whatever. But the one place that it still rings true seems to be at the doctor's office.
Yeah. Interesting.
And maybe it's just because they're that much more persistent on it. I mean, maybe is that an American thing? Because we are kind of turned off by people insisting on their title and authority.
Yeah. So one thing I learned to come into Arkansas here is that especially for ladies. I don't know in what way this holds for men, but um, children are expected, taught to address older ladies as Miss and then their first name, right? So Miss Sally,
Mm-hmm.
Miss Anne, and so on. And so that's the convention, right? That's the convention. At least it seems to be to me. Um, uh, and that's what it is. Like there's a convention. Each place has its convention, which might give more or less distinctiveness. This is reminding me of that book we read by Joe Rigney about emotional, sabotage, emotional sabotage, right? How when you lose, what's the word that he uses for it? This like hierarchy, distinctiveness, degree. When you lose a sense of degree, organizations, cultures fall apart. And so you have different ways of expressing degree. Might be using a formal address like Mr. or Mrs., but it might just be like this is how this, in one place it might sound the same as in another place, but it means something very different. Um, right. So like there's some churches where it's just like it's customary to Pastor Bob, right? It's not a demeaning title. It's not like an attempt to belittle him. It's just how he's being addressed, right?
Right. Yeah, I ran into this at Sam's Club. I was shopping there with a friend of the podcast, Bruce Tim, and we ran into a guy wearing his collar. And I go, "Hey, look, it's one of us." And he was a traditional Catholic, and you could go to Wikipedia and look that up. Breakaway from the papacy, and so they insist the seat of Rome has not been held since Vatican II. And I'm like, you guys know we did this like 500 years ago,
Yeah.
but what, whatever. But one of the key distinctions he made, he introduced himself as Father last name, and then
Mhm.
he goes, yeah, that's something we still insist on being called by our last names as opposed to the other Catholics. Because there's something really funny. If I just started calling you Father Dave, I I mean that's so humorous, right? Because it's so formal with the title, but then I mean that sounds like a pizza chain, Father
Well,
Dave's.
it's like the way that your last name gets used by your bros when you're playing ball. Buchs, like there's a formality to it, but on the other hand, it's like just the quickest way to refer to me because there's probably a couple days on the team, right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean you would be like after I made a shot, if I had your last name, I'd be like, that's straight bucks, you know, straight cash, homie, and then Buckets for buckets.
So my question is whether that's one way to describe what's going on with the the move from Yahweh to Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Is there an element of intimacy that's increasing here?
Well, why do you use that word? But sure. I mean, it's a level of it's it's a level of access. That's for
Familiarity.
sure.
How about that? Familiarity.
Well, for familiarity and access, and if you know somebody's name, there's a sense of authority that comes with it because I can get your attention.
Right.
Like if we're just out in public and I know your name, I can yell at you and I get your attention.
That's true. Think about like somebody in a high office, like the president, for instance. He might say to somebody, "Hey, you can call me Donald." But if somebody from the crowd, from the press corps, were to shout out Donald, he'd be like, "That's disrespectful. I presume, I'm not answering your question." But if he had said it to you and he knew your voice and you said Donald, like that would be different. It'd be a different matter.
Yep, that's right. Did you have a high school nickname?
No, no, I did not.
No.
What was
That,
yours?
well, so Justin Bieber was a phenomenon, and so Reber fever was a was a seminal movement in the 2010s.
I wish that I had been around for that.
I know. Hey, are you reading anything good?
I told you about that this book I'm reading about Anthony Comstock, and I wanted to hold up these two books side by side because this is kind of my dream actually, is to find competing sources on a subject and dive in. So Anthony Comstock on the on this side to be your left, I guess. A biography. It's a very sympathetic biography. Like the description that Trumbull gives for Comstock's physical appearance is uh, he sounds like he sounds like he was a real good looker. Let me just see if I can find it real quick here. It's those blue gray eyes that can flash fire. It's kind of a little bit over the top, actually, now that I think about it. Something about his calves and his oh he was like 5'8", but he wore his 220 pounds like it was 180 pounds or something like that. So on the one hand, you get this really sympathetic, I know, but I mean it's kind of fits in the character of this kind of it's hagiography in a way. Like you're gonna do things like that, and it sounds different to our ears than it does to their ears. But side by side with The Man Who Hated Women, which is about the free love anarchists, social liberals, sexual radicals who he was constantly jailing and who were fighting against him in order to kind of loosen up sexual mores. Now that was a really interesting thing. Just one comment, something that I didn't realize, but this book uncovers. We had talked before, you and I, about how wild the 19th century was, right? Wild in terms of like new religious phenomenon, and wild in terms of deviant behaviors, like communes that were like free love communes popping up all over the place, strange stuff. These two things go hand in hand. Spiritualism, like cult seances, consorting with the dead, goes hand in hand with anarchism and sexual libertinism. And the thing that I haven't really kind of reckoned with is that it's a misapplication of the term Gnosticism, but there's an element of like there's something above this plane of earthly existence, this physical existence. And so when these sexual radicals are talking about sex, sexual behavior, they're thinking about um, they're trying to access something higher than like mere pleasure or whatever it is. They're thinking of it as access to a higher plane, something transcendent. That's that's really interesting. Kind of I don't know why I hadn't really reckoned with that before, but so that you get that alongside Anthony Comstock, who's like just like we need to put people in jail. Like we need to throw prostitutes in jail, abortion doctors, people who peddle contraceptives. We need to throw them all in jail and stop this nonsense. Like that's his take.
Sounds fascinating. I can't wait to read your book review on the Anthony Comstock literature out there.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
You
What are you
wanna you
reading?
wanna guest publish a book review in the cloud?
I'll do it. I'll do it. That sounds good.
That sounds great. So I just finished that Stephen King novel, second in the Dark Tower series. fascinating. Can't wait to see where it goes. So I'm kind of at a transitionary period right now between books. I am going to start preparing for Advent midweek, so I've picked up a couple books on Malachi. I'm gonna go with Malachi. I gotta decide how I'm gonna do the divisions because it's 4 chapters and we have 3 midweeks. So that'll be fun. But I'm really looking forward uh, to that. And then I'm gonna read a biography about Origin by Jean Danielou,
Mm.
who Jesuit priest, brilliant scholar, and so I'm looking forward to that as well.
I read this week that Origen was the counterpoint to Augustine in the numbering of the Ten Commandments in the early church. So Origen had graven images as number two, I think. I'd like you to confirm that for me when you read the biography, please.
Okay, just reading the back of the book, it did mention Augustine, so it's going to be a divide. So that'll be interesting to see if that comes up. Another comment on the 19th century. So the 19th century gave us Darwinism, communism, Nietzsche, higher criticism, how we read the Bible. I could probably keep going on.
So this is part of what I was thinking about with Alan Dulles and um, promiscuity and so on. I like I take it for granted, and I think lots of people do, that we've experienced this dramatic moral decline. And when I think about the 19th century, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we're worse off than they were. I really, I just don't know.
Yeah, I like to say that all of our problems flow out of 19th century Germany, and it's a little bit of hyperbole, but it's not so far off the mark. Of course, it's incredibly short-sighted to say that because nothing new is under the sun, of course. But a lot of our modern, like it all gets funneled there and then just kind of spits out, fiery garbage. So we should reckon, and a lot of them were Lutherans. I'll just throw that out there. uh, Next time on the Cloudcast, we'll answer the question, what's wrong with us? Stay tuned.
All right, I'm going to hit stop.
Perfect.